Hello, everyone.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's Triangle Children, Youth, and Families Policy Institute. My name is Dawn LeBlanc, and I am the training coordinator for PCANC. Just a few things before we get started. This event is being recorded, so your cameras and microphones have been turned off. If you need technical help, please use the question tab located at the right of your screen. All registrants for today's webinar will receive a recording of the presentation, the PDF documents mentioned during today's presentations, and a very brief survey of your experience today. We would love to hear your feedback. Now I'll turn it over to Stacy to get started. Stacy.
Thank you, Dawn. And hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the 2020 Regional Policy Institutes. My name is Stacy Justice, and I am the Associate Director with North Carolina Families United. Our planning team and sponsors are excited to bring you today's lineup of speakers and presenters. We're thrilled to welcome Youth Transition Program Director with North Carolina Families United, Lacey Flinthall, as our opening keynote, followed by an Advocacy 101 presentation by Beth Messersmith with Moms Rising. She works as a Senior Campaign Director. And then we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll hear from our Parent Voice keynote, Shayla Aries with Moms Rising. She works as the Mama's Compadre Campaign Associate. And then we'll wrap it up with our legislative panel discussion featuring Senator Valerie Fouché, Senator Natalie Murdoch, and Representative Verla Insco. We have received so many thoughtful questions from our panelists, and we will try to cover as many of them as we can, but our time with them is limited. Please note that the panel discussion is not interactive, and will be in a question and answer format. So let's get started today with a special welcome from Governor Cooper.
Hi everybody, I'm Governor Roy Cooper. Welcome to the 2020 Regional Children, Youth and Families Policy Institute. As we've faced unprecedented challenges this year, I've seen North Carolinians rise to the occasion, working to protect their loved ones from this virus and going the extra mile to help their neighbors. That spirit is what makes me confident that we'll emerge from this pandemic a stronger and more resilient state. As we work to make things better, we need to ask ourselves, how do we help ensure all children grow up in a safe, stable, and nurturing environment? This institute will provide critical information and strategies needed to answer that question and support children and families across our state. As you hear from experts about the issues that impact the well-being of children the most, I hope you use what you learn from each other to help your own communities. Thank you to the people who made this virtual event possible, and to all of you for participating today. Your efforts are making North Carolina a better place for children and families. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Governor Cooper. Now I will turn it over to Lacey Flinthall with North Carolina Families United. Lacey? Can you hear us, Lacey? There we are.
Can you hear me?
Yes. And you have the ability to share your slides.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm actually trying to get them to come up right now. That's why it was taking me so long.
Okay. That's okay.
All right. And is it showing yet? No.
No, you have to share your screen.
Well, for the sake of time, while I'm still working here, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself.
Okay.
Thank you. As mentioned, my name is Lacey Flinthall. Excuse my voice, it's drowning out a bit. I spent the weekend coaching youth over the weekend, and it seems as if Monday through Friday isn't enough for me. I need to find time on my leisure. I need to find ways in my leisure time to work with transition age youth. But my name is Lacey Flinthall. I'm the Youth Transition Program Director at North Carolina Families United. And essentially what that means is that I'm the lead facilitator for our evidence-based high fidelity wraparound model titled Renew. It's designed for transition age youth, which I'll define in just a few seconds as they transition through services and as they transition through adulthood. Transition age youth are defined by the National Institute of Health as youth and young adults between the ages of and on the brink and on the cusp of 13 to 25. Those youth are constantly undergoing changes, constantly transitioning through services, whether that's from educational realms, from middle school to high school, from high school to college, high school to vocational and trade school, and just into adulthood. They're constantly transitioning in and out of services such as foster care, PRTFs, or psychiatric residential treatment facilities. Excuse me, I'm going to try to stray away from the abbreviations. And also in and out of homelessness, in and out of juvenile justice, and so forth. And oftentimes that population finds themselves with the many changes that they're undergoing, being perceived as adults, but yet not having the full brain development of an adult, and therefore, in terms of making decisions with their frontal lobe being less advantaged. And so what we try to do is what I try to do is connect those youth and young adults to services and supports, natural supports and resources within the community, while providing them with with trainings that give them practical skill sets to help them successfully transition into adulthood. Alongside of that, in my position at Families United, I am the co-adult advisor for our nationwide youth empowerment and youth advocacy organization, Youth Moves statewide chapter. So Youth Move is a nationwide organization, but the statewide chapter in North Carolina has 8 local chapters across the state where we have over 70 youth. The nationwide organization has 35 chapters all across the state, 35 statewide chapters all across the country. I'm still working over here, and in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll jump into my why. My why for what I'm doing and working with transition age youth starts with myself and ends with myself in a sense. I think it's I've just loved being the person that I needed at one time. I myself as a youth transitioned through our state's juvenile justice system. Okay, here we go. It's juvenile justice system and adult justice system. Being diagnosed with a mental health and behavioral health diagnosis at the age of 9. I grew up in a household where there was a stigma attached to my I grew up in a household where the stigma, is it showing now? No, it is not. PowerPoint did not. Got it. Okay, is it showing now?
Yes, it is. You're good, Lacey. Thank you.
Trying to show the full thing here.
Do slideshow from beginning.
I thought I did.
You see it right there. Yep, slideshow, play from start.
Thought I did. Sorry. So here we go. All right. So, and with that being said, there was a stigma attached to the mental health and behavioral health diagnosis that I received in my household, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to receive the services that I needed in order to help me overcome some of my obstacles that were placed in front of me. And I look back and I always wonder. I always think about the youth that not only myself, but the peers that I had alongside of me in school, whether it was in sports, whether it was in the community, who needed to be connected to a resource, that needed to be connected to a service, but just didn't because of the stigma attached to mental health. And then that, again, as a 9-year-old and going all the way, transitioning all the way through college, I didn't receive the help that I needed until my junior year of college. And that was a start, but I was still so far away to go. And so with that, again, that led me to transition through different services in our state. And in doing so, I struggled. And I love the opportunity that I have now to be the light. And so upon my recovery, I want to say in the midst of my recovery, I was connected to North Carolina Families United as an intern. I needed an internship to finish my bachelor's degree. I was connected to North Carolina Families United and Youth Move. And after a year and a half of transitioning through our youth empowerment, youth advocacy organization, and serving as an intern, I was able to receive my bachelor's degree, which then in turn led me to pursue some other entrepreneurial dreams, also to continue to work with youth in the community who had behavioral health and mental health diagnosis. Well, all of a sudden one day I'm just doing my normal work in the community, and I get a call that says the position that I interned for was then open. I applied for the position, and I think this is a true testament to lived experience and to our mission and our vision at North Carolina Families United, because having a family and youth experience and family and youth involvement along the process and every step of the way really made a difference here. I interviewed for the position to be the Youth Transition Program Director, and with the board members and with staff members, I was second on the list. It was later disclosed to me, but part of the interview was to interview with the youth and families that you would be working with, and that held a lot of weight in the interviewing in the selection process, and that was where I was chosen as number one, and in turn landed this position and been here for almost 3 years now, and I can truly say it's been one of the best things that ever happened to me, and I think that because of the opportunity that it's given me to work, I want to say the opportunity it's given me to reach youth, and also to I have 3 kids, and that also gives me an opportunity to say, hey, who would be I'm laying a foundation and the groundwork for someone who worked with my own kids later. So again, as I mentioned earlier, it starts with me and also begins with me in the end, which is, it seems pretty selfish, but in turn it just makes sense that way. And so I want to speak with you about transition age youth. As I mentioned before, and how the National Institute of Health diagnoses that age demographic. That age demographic, again, they encounter a lot of changes, and I want to talk about transition age youth by the numbers. So by the numbers, the percentages of it's all 20% of all transition age youth experience a mental health and behavioral health issue within a given year, and approximately half of those of all transition age youth with mental health issues drop out of high school. They don't complete high school, and we all know that education is a catalyst to in any form of fashion. Education is a catalyst to a more successful and a more enjoyable life, and so in moving forward, 50% to anywhere between half and 3/4 of transition age youth through the justice systems are coping with the mental health and behavioral issue. And that goes along to say, in reference to the youth that I'm working with specifically through Renew, our evidence-based model here at Families United, a lot of youth are connected to services in terms of assessments and evaluations, but a lot of times without someone there with a lived experience to hold their hand and walk them through the process, they fall through the cracks and they're not able to be connected into services. So they're not able to sustain their connection to services. More than 50%, more than half of all lifetime mental health issues develop during transition age youth years. As we mentioned before, this is a very pivotal it's a very pivotal moment in a person's life. I think we can all agree that as transition age youth, we encountered more challenges than we could have ever imagined, and coupled with just not knowing what you don't know, it's very hard to navigate and transition through some of those challenges, and then in turn, you develop behavioral health, mental health issues. You begin to just begin to demonstrate your lack of know-how through different different mannerisms, I would say. So 50, and also half of those transition age youth receiving mental health services or with a mental health issue do not receive adequate treatment. That just goes back to having someone with a lived experience there to hold your hand and walk you through the process. We often talk about with youth and teenagers and young adults that they come to a fork in the road where you have to make a decision. And I'm a firm believer that that's not even the half. I think it's more like they come to like 40 or 50 forks in the roads where they have very pivotal moments, and where essentially if they don't make the right decision, or are somewhat similar to the right decision, just somewhat close to getting it right, it lands them in a deficit and in a bind that they have to work themselves out of, and which making life a lot more difficult, for that transition age youth. The value of having someone with a lived experience, whether it be a family partner or whether it being a youth support partner, is so essential because it gives you the know-how, someone who's already been there before. And so just some facts, some more numbers, just where 1 in 5 children ages 13 through 18 will have a serious mental health illness. And also just to think about the students, this is some of the numbers that I mentioned before that won't finish high school, half of them. And I think in some form or fashion, they may go on to receive a GED of some sort or some other technical trait, but that's also due when connected to services and resources in the community. And moving forward here, I wanted to talk about the not being connected to services and the outcomes that can lead to. And so when they talk about the transition age youth who are experiencing mental health conditions and issues, but not receiving services, the longer a mental health condition is unrecognized and untreated, it's unrecognized, it goes untreated. And when it goes untreated, we just know that the conditions and the issues are bound to worsen at that point. And in place, like again, as I mentioned before, we talk about that deficit that transition age youth can find themselves in. Again, that's usually the age where you're looking to obtain employment, where you're looking to obtain housing, where you begin to drive cars, where you get your license and you want a car, and so forth. And often if you find yourself experiencing issues, acquiring that normalcy that you see all of your peers enjoying, you begin to lash out in certain ways. I guess in terms of preventing that, the term in terms of our best way of preventing that is earlier intervention. Just recognizing and connecting the services earlier. And so we're also moving forward in terms of the justice system. In-state incarceration facilities, 73% of the women and more than half, so 3/4 of the women and more than half of the men are experiencing mental health conditions, which I guess you could argue that comes in many different forms, but ultimately in terms of, I think that's neither here nor there. What we want to focus on is in our incarceration systems or in our justice systems are rehabilitation. It's one of those things that one hand washes the other. They both wash the face. I'm gonna, if you for the next couple of minutes, I'm gonna use a lot of analogies. But that in the event that you find yourself, if an individual found themselves experiencing mental health illness and looking and transitioning through our state's justice system, what's gonna, in terms of them, in terms of limiting or recidivism, we would need for them to recover holistically and not just in terms of offending the law, but because that doesn't happen if they haven't been able to improve their mental health conditions. And so here's my last slide. I just really want to place emphasis on the fact that a lot of people, in terms of the stigma that I mentioned in my own household and across the world, in a sense, is that most people feel comfortable, especially transition age youth, feel comfortable. Studies have shown that they feel comfortable receiving treatments at the peer level. And so again, that places emphasis on the importance between having, again, that lived experience and youth support partners and family partners. And so I think that we can all agree that, I guess, and I wanted to make sure that this is understood on my behalf, is that I wholeheartedly, not only do I wholeheartedly believe in this but in terms of my own self, I've seen this in my experience, in my professional experience, working with youth. I've seen the importance of the lived experience in youth engagement and the changes that it makes. Having someone there where their story resonates with you, and you're not expected to be judged for the services that you're receiving or for the challenges and the issues that you're having. Someone who can meet you where you're at and understand that, hey, because they've been there too, or they've been closely associated with where you're at one point. And so it helps reduce the stigma. It helps have our families and our youth connected to supports, services, trainings that give them practical skill sets to help them transition to where it is they'd like to be, into a more comfortable and a more enjoyable lifestyle. So that's, I think, as I'm looking down, I think that's my time. But I just kind of wanted to highlight the importance of the lived experience at the youth support at the youth engagement levels.
Thank you so much, Lacey. And actually, you have a couple more minutes, and but what I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Oh, please do. I actually have more. I was just skeptical of going over. Stacey, you know I'm a talker. I could have talked for at least another 30 minutes in terms of.
I know.
So.
I know. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then you have like about five more minutes. So what I'll do is ask you these two questions, and then I'll go back off. I'll let you take back over. But one of them was, there was a question regarding, where did you receive this data information on this slide right here, the TABI numbers?
Okay,
and that's the first one. And then if you could talk about how participants and organizations and agencies can engage youth, like what are best practices in getting them involved in these policy and at the table. Okay.
Absolutely. So I'll start by saying the numbers that from the research in my slides and my presentation came from three different sources, which I probably should have put a works cited page. Again, I didn't think I'd have enough time, but there was there's the World Health Organization, the WHO, the National Institute of Health, and the CDC. And so moving on to the next question, that agencies or organizations can engage these youth again by meeting them where they're at, sticking and abiding by system of care ideologies and principles, and having that youth, that lived experience and at the family at the peer support level, at the family partner and the youth support level, connecting them to services and resources such as and all across the state. I can name quite a few, but connecting them with organizations such as Say So, Youth Thrive, ourselves at North Carolina Families United with youth with our Youth Move nationwide empowerment advocacy organization, giving them and at that level. There and at those with those different organizations, there's another one, Youth Empowerment Solutions, YES program, and at those with those different agencies or organizations, youth, they have different programs and projects for youth that will that will train our youth, that provide trainings throughout the year, that provide them, as I mentioned earlier, with information, with an abundance of information, with practical skill sets, providing them with constant resources, with resource booklets, resource guides. The state collaborative, the North Carolina System of Care State Collaborative Committee also has a transition age youth subcommittee as well that that is in the process right now of working on a resource guide for transition age youth. And some of these trainings that are provided they consist of financial literacy training, judicial literacy training, youth I'm thinking gosh, there's a list, and I'm having trouble. I'm drawing a blank right now. But through so mental health first aid training, wellness recovery action planning, and many more. I want to say that there's I'm actually dropping the ball here somewhere down the line, but I think because I'm being put on the spot here. But there's various trainings that our youth can undergo on how to tell your story in public speaking, and so forth. And it goes down the line. I think that to where these trainings all come together comprehensively to make a more rounded, more well prepared adult, and the more connections that our youth and young adults can be connected to, they can comprehensively better prepare them as they transition into adulthood. Oh, and also making them more aware of what's taking place around them politically, in terms of policy and law, with law changes and bills that are coming through, because our transition age youth, as we identified between 13 and 25, there's that 18 to 25 young adult range where they have the youth can have a lot of say so. The youth from 13 to 18 can have a lot of say. 17 can have a lot of say so in terms of just influence. But the 18 to 25-year-old actually have a place where they can vote and have a say so on some of these policy change.
Thank you so much, Lacey. We appreciate you being here today, and your presentation your slides, we'll try to share your slides when we send stuff out. So thank you so much, Lacey.
All right, thank you, Stacey.
All right, I am going to now turn it over to Beth Messersmith with Moms Rising to do the Advocacy 101. Beth. I can't see you as of right now, Beth. Is your camera on?
There we go. Is that better?
Hey, yes. And I can see your screen. All right. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be here to be part of this conversation with you all, talking about what is truly my favorite topic, which is advocacy and lobbying. I know that sounds weird. I realize that this may be a unique issue that I have, but to me, advocacy, when we're talking about advocacy and lobbying, we're talking fundamentally about how we change the world and how we make lives better for the people that we serve, for those in our communities, for our neighbors. And to me, it's about how we build power. It's not just about winning, but it's about how we win and how people feel about being part of our democracy as a result of it. So I'm grateful to be here. The folks that are sponsoring this webinar are some people that I have tremendous admiration for. They're doing great work every day for families in North Carolina, and I'm so grateful to get to be a part of this.
Hey, Beth,
Yes.
It's yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt you, but we can't see your slides. We can see your screen. We
Oh,
can
how
see,
strange. Okay. You
now I
see,
can see your
There we
slides.
go.
okay,
Yes.
great.
There we
Thank you, Malia.
I just wanted to let you know that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So for those of you who don't know who Moms Rising is, we're a grassroots organization of moms, dads, aunts, uncles, grandparents. We actually say anybody with a belly button, who are working to build a more family-friendly state and nation. For us, that means working on a very broad range of issues because we know that families' lives are touched by so many different intersecting challenges and opportunities. Nationally, we have over 1 million members. You can see on this slide my colleagues from across the country. There are over 40 of us working from home on flexible work schedules, trying to build the kind of family-friendly nation that we believe in. Here in North Carolina, we have 47,000 members. North Carolina was the first state chapter of Moms Rising. We have folks in all 100 counties, and we've been doing this, like I said, since 2008. And you can see here some of my many colleagues, our members. In the top left, you see Shayla Arias, who's going to be speaking later this morning, my colleague, and across the board, just folks that have done tremendous work in our state. Moms Rising also has a Spanish language community, Mamas con Poder, and Shayla leads that work in North Carolina. This group is to make sure that we're engaging Spanish-speaking mothers and those who care about issues that affect families, not just on issues that might be considered of importance specifically to the Latinx community around immigration, for example, or DACA, but around all the different issues, because we need to make sure that we're building representative, inclusive tables across every issue that we work on. So what do we work on? In North Carolina, Moms Rising works on things like workplace justice. This is paid family and medical leave and sick days that have become even more important during the pandemic. Early learning, compensation for our early childhood workforce, access to health care, hunger and food insecurity. Heartbreakingly, many of you probably know this, North Carolina is one of the hungriest states in the nation, which is just unforgivable. Immigration, gun violence prevention, having toxic-free childhoods, maternal justice, things like ending the school to prison pipeline. And the reality is that we may make these different buckets of work, but as Audre Lorde reminds us, there is no single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives. A family that's struggling to afford childcare probably is also maybe struggling to afford food, needs the earned income tax credit, doesn't have access to paid sick days. So many times our stories are intertwined. And the reality is that when we come together and we realize that the issues we face are not individual failings, but systemic problems that require systemic policy solutions, we can win. These are pictures just from the last year or two. On the left, you can see the one at the legislature when we worked with Representative Meyer to introduce the paid family and medical leave insurance bill. On the bottom left, you can see Governor Cooper signing an executive order guaranteeing state employees the use of safe days if they've been a victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. In the middle, you can see some of the many folks we've worked with in Charlotte to win local paid leave down there. And then on the right-hand side, you can see when Governor Cooper passed the state paid parental leave for state employees, which just in the last year alone has meant about 1,600 state employees could be there to welcome a new child to their family. So, when we work together, it's powerful and we win, right? So what is advocacy? I want to make sure I get all my notes here. Advocacy is to advocate is to defend or to promote a cause. It's an active thing. It's not passive. It goes beyond shaping legislation or just policy. The real goal here is systems change, across the board systems change. And oftentimes people conflate advocacy and lobbying together. They oftentimes are paired together and they support and complement each other, but they're not the same thing. So as you can see on the slide, advocacy can include things like telling your legislator how an action impacts you or your organization, how budget cuts have actually trickled down and what that looks like in your community. It can be educating a member of Congress or the General Assembly about the effects of a policy on your constituency. Or inviting people. The early learning community does a fantastic job of inviting lawmakers to come and tour early learning centers, meet with early child care professionals so that lawmakers, when they're making decisions about things like early learning funding, actually have seen what that looks like in their community and why it matters. So that's all advocacy. Lobbying is a little more specific. It's about specifically having a position on a piece of legislation or a budget decision, and saying how to a decision maker who has the power to make that decision and what you want them to do. There are very specific legal guidelines around lobbying, and I would point you to the Center for Nonprofits and the Alliance for Justice for more details about that. But it includes things like asking them to vote for or against a specific piece of legislation, doing a call to action. If you're on the Moms Rising list, you'll often get emails from me saying, right now they're making a decision. There's a moment of opportunity here for you to make your voice heard. Send your email right now and tell them to vote yes or no. So those calls to action. It also includes prepping the materials to do your lobbying. So if you're making a fact sheet to go on a meeting with a lawmaker, that counts in your lobbying hours as well. But really, if you need more information about that, check out the Alliance for Justice. They have tremendous resources that you can look to. The thing that I would want to stress about both advocacy and lobbying is that ultimately it's about relationship building. Very, very, very rarely are you only going to be going back to a decision maker once. You're going to be going back to them over and over again, and maybe not about that particular issue, maybe about other issues, but the goal here is to build a long-term relationship. You want to be seen as a trusted source. You want to be seen as a thought partner. You want to be seen as someone whose opinion on the issues that affect families in your community is valued. And that's going to shape how you do your advocacy and lobbying work. If you knew that it was a one and done thing, you might proceed differently. But because it's a long-term relationship, you have to be very intentional about how you manage building that. And as I mentioned earlier, the fact is that child and family involvement and advocacy efforts can have a huge impact. I think for far too long, there's been a tendency to say that maybe children shouldn't be at the legislature, children shouldn't go to Congress, that sort of thing. And the reality is that has often meant that mothers' voices have been left out and fathers' voices have been left out, because it can be difficult to take off in the middle of the workday, especially if you feel like an environment isn't welcoming for your children. But the reality is that children and families are huge stakeholders in the decisions that are made in our local communities, in Raleigh and in DC. And when those voices come forward, they're instructive. They bring different perspectives. They put a face on the numbers that lawmakers are inundated with numbers and statistics, but being able to put a face on the people who are affected by the decisions they make is tremendously important. And as all of you know, right now, there is a lot of opportunities for voices to be heard on issues that are impacting children and families right now. Things like Medicaid transformation, early childhood interventions. We know that right now our early childhood system is struggling with funding thanks to the pandemic. Paid leave and paid sick days. Funding for programs. Next year is going to be a huge year for figuring out what the budget looks like. What are community-based service availability when families are losing their jobs right now? And because there's so many important issues out there, there are lots of ways for people to plug in. Whether you're wanting to plug in as an individual or you are wanting to plug in as someone who can connect those you serve and lift up. And we talk about, we don't speak for the people who are Moms Rising members, we amplify their voices and the voices that lawmakers need to be hearing. And so each of you in your roles can do that as well. And it's about finding those windows of opportunity when it can really make a difference. At Moms Rising, we talk about there's no action without urgency. The children and the families that we organize live very, very busy lives. Nobody can multitask like a mom, I'm just saying. But we want to make sure that we're respecting that time by providing opportunities that can make a tremendous difference. And in order to do that, you have to plan. So doing your homework and creating your messaging. First it's about identifying your priorities. I don't know about you all, but sometimes I get overwhelmed by the number of things that I want to work on, the things that I feel like need to be changed for our communities. And I can't do it all at once, right? That's a recipe for disaster. So it is about figuring out what are those priorities. How do you make sure that you layer them in such a way that you build power? You got to know how to track your priorities and your goals and see if you're making progress on them. Figuring out who are the key policymakers and decision makers who can give you what you want, and then creating that message to bring others into the fight as well. So I think you have to start with what's a problem versus an issue. A problem is an area of concern, something that you see is wrong in the community. If you only stopped at problems, it would be very, very frustrating, because we can all sit around and talk about the problems all day long. The challenge is when you move from problems to issues, because when you have an issue, you're talking about a solution. There's action, there's something that you can actually do about that problem to win change. And it's issues, key issues of concern that we organize and mobilize around. So once you've figured out what your issue is going to be, and when you're trying to do problems versus issues, I would point you to 2 resources. The first is Organizing for Social Justice, which is a book. It's a handbook. I wish I had it here to show you. It's a workbook for advocacy and organizing, and it has a great way to think about what are the different ideas you should think about when you're picking your issues, how do you prioritize issues, that sort of thing. Once you have that figured out, then you move on to your problem, solution, action. Everybody's familiar with the term elevator speech. In some ways, this is your elevator speech about the work that you're doing. So, and it should always have 3 components because they don't work without each other. So first is your problem, communicating the scope, framing it in a way that shows your shared values and brings people in, and includes 1 or 2 pieces of data. Who caused this problem and who can fix it? The solution is, moving quickly. You want to move quickly because if you get bogged down in the problem, then people start to tune out, right? So you want to move quickly to the options for addressing that problem. You need to be clear, and there need to be clear action steps. And finally, you should always end with a call to action. This will vary depending on your audience. If you're talking to a lawmaker, it might be like, I want you to vote yes on this bill. If you're talking to someone in the community, it might be, I need you to call your lawmaker and tell them to vote yes on this bill. If it's, and there are other ones, it's, I need you to invite 3 friends to come to this film screening. I need you to write a letter to the editor. It's something that gives people a way to take action on the issue you're working on. So here's an example. Paid leave is an important issue to me personally. I needed it when my son was born 2.5 months prematurely, which is what launched me on the child and family advocacy world. And I also needed it as my mom fought cancer for the last 5 years. I'm a firm believer that everybody deserves access to paid leave. So that's why I chose this one. So our problem, at some point in our lives, all of us will need time to welcome a new child, care for a seriously ill loved one, or recover ourselves. But only 12% of North Carolinians have access to paid family and medical leave. North Carolina workers are forced to choose between the job they need and the family they love. That communicates, it's got the stat in there, and it communicates our values. We don't want people having to choose between being a good employee and being a good family member. Like, none of us want that, right? So what's the solution? 9 other states and DC have passed paid family and medical leave programs that allow workers to earn a portion of their wages when they have to be out for life's joys or emergencies. North Carolina needs a paid family and medical leave insurance program too. So then the action. Tell your state lawmaker to sponsor the North Carolina Families First Act that would establish a paid family and medical leave insurance program for North Carolina. And I will tell you, any of you all who are on our email list, you're going to be getting this pretty much the same exact message from me come January or February when we're looking to get this bill reintroduced. It's short, it explains what you're trying to accomplish, and you'll want to do that for any issue that you're working on. I would say that when you're talking about building out an advocacy or lobbying campaign, your problem, solution, action message is the bedrock. So the next is, how do you get organized? I don't know if you all have had a lot of exposure to the Midwest Academy before. I'm a huge fan. They're the ones who have the Organizing for Social Justice book. And I would say over the 20 years I've been organizing in North Carolina, this chart is the single resource I come back to time and time and time again. It includes 5 components: the goals, the organizational considerations, the constituents, allies, and opponents, your targets, and your tactics. Now, some of these columns are more fun than others, but they're all important and they all work together to take you to a stronger place. So goals, your long-term, you need to have 3 kinds of goals: long-term, intermediate, and short-term goals. And they all have to be, measurable. You'll know when you got there. And they also need to be things that you can celebrate when you accomplish them, especially those incremental and short-term goals, because the celebration and the recognition of the power that you've built will help propel you to the next level. Organizational considerations. This is things like your budget, your staff, but it's also things like the relationships you have. Do you have people you can work in coalition with? It's a taking stock of everything you have going into this effort. The third column, constituents, allies, and opponents, is much more about, it's the kind of your traditional power mapping. So you need to know who cares and how much on both sides, right? And then you need to figure out a little bit about who might be persuadable in that spectrum. So it's a critical lay of the land moment before you move on to the actual advocacy and lobbying efforts. The next one, the next two are targets and tactics, and I'll go into those a little more in the next slides. So targets, who do you need to influence? If we were in person, I would make you stand up and join me in saying, a target is always a person, a target is always a person, a target is always a person. Because that's what often gets lost here. It's easy to say, oh, we're targeting the General Assembly. There's 170 people in the General Assembly and all their legislative staffers, right? You can't target the General Assembly, but you can target individual lawmakers who have the power to help give you what you want, right? So there's two types of targets, primary targets and secondary targets. So the primary target is the person who can give you what you want. The secondary target is someone who has more power over the primary target than you do. So as a mom of a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, I am often the primary target. If they wanted to have pre-COVID times a sleepover, for example, now I might be the decision maker, but they might know that if they call my dad and they say, oh, Judy, I really want to have my friend come over, and maybe you could tell mama that I need to have friends over or something. He's a great secondary target. He could say, oh, those kids have been so good. Don't you think you should let them have friends over, right? In the legislature, and the primary target may be a lawmaker. The secondary target might be someone from their church, someone who worked on their campaign, someone they go hiking with. It's someone in their community. It might be their local Smart Start director. Smart Start directors are great secondary targets who might have a closer relationship to a primary target. You're going to have to do some research to figure out who the best targets are, and especially some research to figure out who those secondary targets are. And likely you'll come up with way more targets than you have the ability to work on engaging. So targeting is always about prioritizing and about trying to figure out the most effective person who can help give you what you're looking for. In the North Carolina General Assembly, there's 120 members in the House. And I would say that this is, when you're talking about how to engage your members, I think we should always start with basic civics 101, because the reality is that for many of us, civics was a very long time ago, or social studies was a long time ago. And so going back and never assuming that anyone specifically knows how either the General Assembly or Congress or your city council, any of those work, is always the important first step. So everybody's working from the same place. So in the General Assembly, there's 120 members in the House, led by the Speaker of the House. And in the Senate, there's, so in the Speaker of the House is Tim Moore. In the Senate, there's 50 members led by the Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger. They have 2-year, and currently we have Republican majorities in both of the houses. They have 2-year terms. They start in odd number years, so we have elections in even number years. We're about to have a new one, obviously, and then folks will go back in to start a new term in the end of January. The General Assembly, every state, because Moms Rising works in so many different states, I've been amazed to see the variety of how state legislatures particularly work. In North Carolina, we have what's called the long session, which happens in odd years. Typically, that'll run from the end of January through August or September. The longer sessions tend to have gotten longer. The short sessions usually start late April, beginning of May in the even number years. They've also tended to get longer, although this year there was a lot of push because folks wanted to make sure they could get back out on the campaign trail. You can find your legislators on ncleg.gov. You can look them up by county, by your address, all sorts of different ways, and they can tell you both at the state level and at the federal level who represents you. It'll let you link directly to their profiles. You can get their email addresses, their phone numbers, and also really important information that you're going to need about what committees they sit on, maybe what their occupation is outside of the General Assembly, what bills they've sponsored and co-sponsored. It's a treasure trove of information. And I will say the North Carolina General Assembly website is really well done. Their bill searching is great. So you should spend some time on there if you haven't already. The next column of this is the tactics triangle. There are lots of different tactics that you could choose from. Starting at the bottom, there's things like mass participation, petitions, those click to take action emails that you get. Above that, there's more the personalized emails, the letters. Above that still, there's the phone calls. And then things like personal petition visits, story deliveries, and then at the very top, those in-person meetings, those face-to-face connections, whether they're in Zoom or in person, and those secondary target contacts. Generally, the rule of thumb is that the more personal or the more time-intensive a tactic is, the fewer people will take them, but the higher the impact will be, because decision makers know that it takes more effort, right? The less personal that they are, more people will do them. I guess I would want to make sure that I argue they're all important. Yes, the ones at the very top there that have high impact can sometimes be the make or breaks. But at Moms Rising, we're firm believers that it should be mixing and matching. And ideally, the more avenues of engagement that you have open and the more different directions you're coming in from, the more effective you're going to be. I know a lot of times people talk about the ladder of engagement, getting somebody to come in and take a really easy action and then, moving them up to a harder action. And it creates this hierarchy of perhaps the person's commitment, et cetera. What we've learned at Moms Rising is that that's not 100% the case, right? A lot of the people that we work with, the level of action that they can take does not reflect their interest or their commitment or desire. It affects the fact that maybe they're working 2 jobs, or maybe they're struggling with a child with a child who has extra needs, or maybe there's, there could be any number of factors. And what we want to communicate, and if people's here, well, just sending that email doesn't really make any difference, right? Then they're less likely to do it. When the reality is we like to think about, we call it the welcoming rainbow of engagement, that all of these build on each other, and that they're all important. It's like if you've ever built an arch, you know that if you pull this piece out, the whole thing's going to crumble. And so when you think about it that way, we think it's a much more engaging and welcoming place, and make sure that everybody feels like no matter what they can do, no matter how small, it does matter. Getting to know your legislators and policymakers. At the very core, relationships matter. And you want to build a long-term solid relationship that's based on mutual trust and respect, and where you're seen as a valued partner in this sort of work. Grassroots matter. Advocacy starts at home. Just like any relationship, it's about getting to know each other, right? It can be about educating, creating trust, offering assistance, being that resource, and recognizing that they too are busy and that you want to be effective without taking too much of their time. In this picture on this page, all of those children who are sitting on the stairs in front of the Capitol in DC are North Carolina kids whose parents went up to talk about immigration and the effect that immigration has on families here in North Carolina. We went in, those mothers had FaceTime with the members of Congress. The children were there, and they got to see that it actually mattered if you listen. I mean, if you go and you talk, that it matters. And it was important for the lawmakers to see the families that are affected by the decisions that they're making. Fast actions for busy people. Petitions, emails, letters, and phone calls. The big question we get often, Moms Rising has a lot of petitions. Do they matter? I will say that different organizations use their petitions in different ways. But I guarantee you, because I personally do it, that every time you sign a petition for Moms Rising, it matters. We take those petitions, we bundle them together, we mix them with stories that are submitted through our website, we put in pictures that families share with us, and we, in pre-COVID times, we hand deliver them to every office, often alongside some sort of thing that will remind them that may tie in. When we were talking about the budget, for example, we took petition signatures, stories, and created a budget, like a book, a storybook for each of the issues. And we delivered these little train cars that we made. And we said, we think you can build a better budget for North Carolina's kids. We delivered those back in 2013. And to this day, when I go to the offices, those little trinkets will still be sitting on the shelves of folks that have been there that long. So yes, they matter fundamentally. When you're making emails, letters, phone calls, make it personal. You can always personalize the emails that you send through Moms Rising's page. I know through many of our partners' pages. And when you can add a story in about how it affects your family, it makes a big difference. Always know the bill number. And that can be looking to partners, trusted partners, or looking it up on the NC Ledge website. Be polite, let them know you're a constituent. Make sure you include a clear ask. The last thing you want to do is have taken the time to send an email or made a phone call, and at the end, the legislative assistant on the other end is going, So what do they want from us? So you want to make sure that that's clear. And include your email and your physical address because they want to know that you're a constituent in their district. There's a lot of text on this slide, and I apologize for that. When you have an opportunity, as we're moving up that, that kind of triangle for in-person meetings, there are ways to make those more effective. You're going to want to make an appointment. Right now, lawmakers, both at the state and the federal level, are making Zoom appointments, and those are really, or conference call appointments, and those are really effective and good uses of both your time and their time. You always want to present your views in a respectful and dignified manner. Typically 15 to 20 minutes is pretty much what you're going to get if you're lucky. During the days that people are there in person at the state legislature, you may get 5 to 10. So you want to make sure you have your primary points ready to send out quickly. 30 minutes to an hour is possible. Usually that's more, that's if you're meeting them in district, or if you're talking with a member of Congress and you're talking with their legislative staff, which is also a really good use of your time to talk to the LA at the federal level who is responsible for making decisions on your particular issue area. And you'll also want to build that relationship with them because the legislative assistants are excellent secondary targets. You're going to want to make sure you have written materials ready, that you have a card in case you accidentally miss the lawmaker when you're walking in, because they're churning all day long, and you want to make sure that when they go back to circle back to your conversation, they have some sort of resource to rely on. Think before you react. There have been many times when I go, right? Because the last thing, you may be upset or angry or frustrated by something that is said in a meeting, but you have to think about the longer term and try to take a breath and move forward, because you do want to have this working relationship that will make them have a good feeling when they think, I should pick up the phone and call and ask so-and-so about early learning because I trust what they have to say, even if I don't always agree with them. You always want to make sure that you thank them for your time and use that thank you email to also provide follow-up information, anything that they ask for in the meeting. And it's another step in building that relationship. This is a lot of duplication. Effective meetings, schedule your meeting, research their positions. So before you go in to meet with them, you're going to want to look up how have they voted on these bills in the past? Have they co-sponsored any of them? You're also going to want to know where what your bill number is and where it is in the process. Has it been assigned to committee? Is it in rules? What does the timeline look like for them to take up your bill? You'll want to develop those main talking points. You'll have a lot of this already from your problem solution action, right? But you'll want to make sure you have your key facts, how it specifically affects their local community, especially in the General Assembly. They want to know at a county level, how are people being affected by this? You're going to want, ideally, to pick a team. Meetings with legislators work best, I've found, when you can have a number of people, a small group from the community who can bring different perspectives that will be valued by the lawmaker, and you can kind of do a team effort. Really more than 6 and it gets overwhelming and you don't have enough time for everybody to talk in 20 minutes, which can be frustrating for everyone. So 6 is about perfect. And pre-meetings are critically important. I include the picture on this slide, not because it's a great picture of me, because I don't really love it, but one of our, Shayla, you might have even taken this picture. That's Senator McKissick. We're all wearing our orange. It's Gun Violence Prevention Day. And, we talk about lobbying sometimes because it actually happens in the lobby. And that's what was happening here. I didn't actually have a meeting scheduled with him, but I had an opportunity to stop and talk with him about that bill, because he was when he was in the legislature, a huge supporter of gun violence prevention efforts, and also talk with him about some of our paid leave work and pregnant worker work, which he also happened to support. So, using those quick moments, literally possibly in the elevator or in the lobby, to get your point across is really important. So when you're meeting with lawmakers, schedule a pre-meeting. If you don't do anything else, the pre-meeting is essential. I've seen so many legislator constituent meetings go poorly because people didn't take the time to really create a strategy. And that's a shame, because why would you go to all the effort of, preparing your material, scheduling a meeting, and not do that basic strategy right beforehand? So what you'll want to do, this can be a conference call, usually I say, you can do this in 20 to 30 minutes, but you're going to want to make sure everybody is on the same page about reviewing the legislation, knowing where it is, knowing what the background and the potential concerns of the target might be. brainstorming the goals as a group and making sure that all of you are on the same page about what will an effective and successful meeting look like at the end of this. And you're going to want to discuss roles, and there are some pretty clear roles you need covered. You're going to need that person who starts things off and says, hi, we're here today because X and Y. You're going to want a note taker because you're not going to want to miss any of these details. You're not going to want to miss the things you need to follow up on. You're going to need someone who is comfortable making the ask. So, Senator so-and-so, we need you to support X, or we need you to help convince your colleague to support X. You want everybody in the group to have some sort of role. Other roles can include storytellers. They can include providing county level data. And every different personality types like different pieces of this role. And it's an important place for you to have a chance to sort that out. You'll want to figure out what information is important to share and make sure that you're providing a balance of stories and facts and info on the broader impact. Legislator constituent meetings can get derailed when somebody gets too focused on their story or on one particular point, etc. And so you want to have set a group norm that is kind of like, we're getting in, we're getting out, this is what we're going to do, right? So that everybody is in agreement and bought into the idea that there's a plan and we're not going to derail it. So that's about the agreeing on the agenda. Expect no more than 20 minutes. Also expect that in the General Assembly, it might be half of that or a quarter of that. And so you need to be ready to pivot. In your meeting, have the person start off with introductions. Remember, you're building a long-term relationship there again. Make sure you state your asks clearly. It's kind of like those phone calls and emails. You would hate to go away from a meeting and them not know exactly what you wanted them to do with the information you just shared. You're also equally important to getting that answer to your ask, and they may not actually be willing to give you a clear answer about whether they're going to support the bill or not. But this is an opportunity for you to create that rapport where you're a resource and find out exactly what their concerns are and find the materials that you need to help convince them to move forward with it. Don't be afraid to say you don't know. I think a lot of times people feel like they go into these having to be the expert. You don't. Don't ever fake it. The last thing you want is to have been caught bluffing in a meeting with a legislator. It's much more authentic and effective to say, you know what, I actually don't know that detail, but I'm going to find out. It's a great point. I'm glad you raised it. I'm going to find out and I will send it back to you, in the next day or two. And make sure that you do that, because that kind of sets up that expectation that you will follow through and help them get what they need. If they're supportive, you can tell them, see if they need any resources. That's great. I'm so glad you're going to vote on this. Can I get you some fact sheets? Would you be willing to talk to the other folks in the county delegation? Could you help get me an opportunity to speak before the early childhood caucus? Those sorts of things. So if they say yes, you might want to have a little secondary ask to follow up on it. If they say no, or they're not committal, try to find out why, try to find out what could help move the needle on that. Even though it can be tempting, don't argue. Even when you disagree, take this as an opportunity that they're telling you where they are, and it's up to you to try to figure out how to move that later. And thanking them for the meeting and getting that materials to them. The big thing is, don't feel like you have to be an expert. Don't feel intimidated. Don't get off topic. You have such a short period of time that you don't want to waste it. Moving on to other tactics, you don't want to forget the media. The media is really important in shaping the public narrative, the dialogue, creating an atmosphere of what is possible. And they're also, in some ways, great secondary targets. Local lawmakers love to read the local paper to see what's in the letters to the editor, what are the op-eds saying, what's getting attention as kind of a way to check the pulse of their community. And so being engaged in the media is really important in and of itself for changing the public narrative, but also for advocacy and lobbying as a secondary target too. Sharing your story. We talked earlier about how we use our stories and we merge them with petitions to put faces on stats, for example. You'll see a map here. We have stories, and this is just, there's actually many more stories in this, but all over the country, people writing in, sharing their experience. On the right side of the screen, you see my colleague, Tina Sherman. Some of you may know her. She does paid leave and breastfeeding work for us here. And she's holding a storybook, I Pumped Here. There are so many stories and pictures from women all over the country who've sent in where they had to pump because they didn't have any adequate private place to pump milk. So she collected all of those, and then we put together on the right-hand side of her picture breast milk bags that are full of golden milk chocolate, because we talk about how breast milk is golden for babies, especially NICU babies. And so we delivered those, and she's right in that building. I think she's in one of the Senate office buildings in DC, and we're hand delivering them to everybody that was on the committees that were making decisions around breastfeeding supports. We do that on all of our issues, and those stories are so very important. We also do things like on the left-hand side of this, you see some advertisements for our Voices of Hunger podcast. My colleague Jessica Burrows has been interviewing families all across the state, interviewing families who struggle with food insecurity, and also local heroes who are helping to address these issues of hunger. And so check it out. You can look up Voices of Hunger in North Carolina, and there's so many powerful issues. Collecting stories and then making sure that you connect those stories to decision makers and to the media is really important. I will forever be grateful for the fact that the Durham Partnership for Children connected me to Shayla, who is going to be speaking in a moment, because, you know, also because she's my friend, but because she has become such a tremendously powerful advocate in using her voice and her experiences to move policy. So some things you're going to want to think about: what's your connection to the issue? Are you personally impacted? If you're not, are you just someone who's concerned about an issue in your community? If you don't have your own story, can you reach out to others? So you may be a teacher who doesn't have a story about X, but you are connected to school nurses. And maybe those school nurses are excellent storytellers about why we need paid sick days so parents don't have to send sick children to school. Don't be intimidated. You don't have to write a huge, long novel to share your story. Just the basics of it can be very powerful. A sentence or two can make a lot of difference. When you're collecting stories, it is important to give people options about how they want to be identified, to never assume and to always ask permission. Are people okay with using their full name and their city? Are they comfortable with just initials? Do they need to be anonymous? Storytelling can be sometimes traumatizing for people who have had hard experiences. It can also be dangerous if, for example, you're in a workplace where you feel like you've faced discrimination and you're afraid you'll lose your job if you're talking publicly about that. So there's a lot of trust involved in both collecting and sharing and amplifying stories. So I think that's an important thing to lift up. If you are interested in sharing your story on any of the issues that Moms Rising works on, please let us know. We help collect those. We have a media storytelling team that will help you put your story into words, and also provide media training and legislators training, things like that, so that you can take your story and move it forward. Let's see. Finally, I would say elections matter. Right now, I know we're all tired of the texts and we're tired of the ads, but the reality is that it's all part of the circle of accountability, right? Oftentimes people think, oh, I voted, I did my civic duty, I'm moving on. Well, really, voting is, as you all know, the first step. And then the next step is, okay, so all these new people that come in January, they need educated on all of our issues. There may not be bills to lobby on, but they need to know why funding for early learning matters, what foster care needs, why paid leave is important. They need those sorts of things so that they can start getting their feet under them and figure out where they need to be prioritizing their time this session. So elections matter. That moving forward and the educating them as the bills get filed, then maybe the lobbying, and then afterwards saying, giving that feedback. We really appreciated that you helped to move X. We were disappointed that you didn't do Y, and creating this ongoing cycle of advocacy and education. We are fortunate in North Carolina to be inundated with really powerful resources and so many organizations doing good work. And you can see some of those here and ways to connect with the groups. I would say that Moms Rising always makes sure we don't work in a vacuum. Our advocacy is so much more effective when paired with our partners, who can bring different perspectives. So for example, we were working on pregnant worker accommodations. We were grateful to have Prevent Child Abuse there talking about this as a concrete support. We were fortunate to have folks from the Workers' Rights Project talking about the fact that North Carolina is one of four states in the country with no pregnant worker protections. Different people bringing different angles both creates more validity. It also makes the work easier and more fun, and just overall more powerful. So I would encourage you to always look out for partners. And also, if you're an organization that doesn't primarily do advocacy and lobbying, finding those groups that you trust to to either identify the action windows for you or to help provide you with resources that you can count on when you're doing your own work is really, really helpful. So I think that that's it for me. I'm about right on time, I think. I'd be glad to take any questions that have come up. I would just tell you that the ability to do advocacy and lobbying and lifting up and amplifying the voices of so many people whose stories that I hear every day is what drives me to do this work. It's the work that feeds my soul. And I hope that all of you will find it, yes, it can be a little intimidating, but it can be so incredibly empowering. And I hope that that will be what you take away from this today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Beth. That was a wonderful Advocacy 101 training, and it spoke about utilizing the authentic population for whatever issue it is that you're trying to educate and learn on, teach others about. So that was awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. We are going to go ahead and take a break right now until 10:20. And then when we come back, we will open back up with our parent keynote, Shayla Aries from Moms Rising.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with our parent keynote. We have a wonderful parent keynote here this afternoon, Shayla Aries with Moms Rising.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Shayla. Yes, I can hear you. How are you doing?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited and very blessed for this opportunity this morning.
We're glad to have you. I just wanted to introduce myself real quick. I'm Ann Rodriguez. I'm the Assistant Director with the Eye to Eye Center for Integrative Health. And so Shayla, again, thank you so much for coming today and talking to us. Can you tell us a little bit about the opportunities that you've had to advocate and what that has meant to you?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. I started using my voice without even knowing that my voice had a value or the importance or everything in 2013. As Beth said earlier, both of my kids benefit from programs like Food Stamps, SNAP, and Early Head Start, Medicaid. So during that time, I had a full-time job, and suddenly everything changed because of my oldest child needs. I had to resign on my job, one of my jobs. And so I ended up, like many other families, trying to figure out how to bring food to the table for my kids. So as Early Head Start is an amazing program who not only provides education and support for children, but they also do it for families. So they provided me with the tools, got me ready for an interview. And I ended up being the health and nutrition coordinator for Early Head Start. And that's how I got connected with Moms Rising. And that was my first opportunity in December 2015, when I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. for the first time ever in my life and speak in front of congressmen and representatives in Capitol Hill on my experience and how programs like early learning, Medicaid, and all that benefit families like myself. So that was the first time when I spoke to basically many strangers who did not know my story. but I was there to let them know and highlight how these services have benefited and changed the life of my children and I at that time. So that's when I really realized, after coming back, the magnitude of this and how many families. I was very naive, to say the least, that these programs could really benefit a lot of children, including myself. So it all started there with that opportunity, and then I realized, hey, I am in the same boat as many other families. So why not join, that group and be part of that village to move forward and change things around this country for my kids and other kids.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. And how is it that while you were doing that work and getting started, how did you discover that the impact of the voice that you and other families have on short and long term, as far as short and long term efforts or education?
Well, my oldest daughter is the one who really introduced me to this very unique world. And if it wasn't for her, I would not be here today. But I also realized that as I struggle to navigate a lot of the systems that are not designed for our families, that are not designed for kids who require and learn different, I realized that I was having a hard time navigating these programs and understanding them, mainly because, the vocabulary, the terms, but I also was dealing with acceptance and emotional part of myself. I realized that, if language was a barrier for me, it would have been so much harder. And it brought me to awareness that there's so many other parents who English is not their first language, who is having these issues. So in short term, it really opened my eyes to the barriers when it comes to language barriers, but it also allowed me to know that this is just constantly going and going, because as our kids get older and older, there's different barriers that we face in the long term. There's different things that our kids are going to need in the long term. So this is a constant situation, not just for me, but for many parents who we continue to learn day by day. So, Beth's highlighted very well the importance of stories really can change everything. And that is absolutely true. And I stand by that, because I believe that all stories are very unique and all stories are different. We can share certain things, but we're all different. And we often need to realize that if it wasn't for stories, we would not have this kind of knowledge of what's out there and how we can share those stories to make a difference, not just for me, but for other families. I feel that when I was sharing my stories, more parents were getting comfortable and sharing their stories. So this allowed for other parents to come on board.
That's great. Shayla, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think your perspective is so important as a parent. Having been on the other side, you don't necessarily know what you don't know, and so you have to, when you get to hear that, when you get the opportunity to hear that from parents, what they are experiencing and what they want for their children, it's a really important perspective for legislators and policymakers. One issue that you identified is that issue of language. But I'm wondering if you could tell us some of those things that you have seen over time that we've been able to improve in advocacy and in the system, and then maybe some thoughts you have about things that we still need to do, some work that we can do to really incorporate that family and youth voice in legislation and policy making.
Absolutely. I honestly have seen a lot of growth. It has not been easy. It continues to take a lot of work and dedication from different organizations and individuals, but I do see equal, or at least coming to an equal representations around the table when they're table conversations for parents and kids who are these discussions about laws or things that are being decided on. And before, we really didn't used to have equal representation or diverse representation for these parents who are really being affected directly by these laws. And all we saw was Caucasian individuals who really had no idea of what this is about. So now we are opening the doors and allowing more people to sit in those chairs who really are facing the daily issues with this, decisions that lawmakers are making, representatives, people in a federal level. So organizations that are really, really making a difference and allowing to see beyond, the issues to bring different people. And so one of the biggest things that I always say is that we have to meet people where they are and really put our agendas aside and try to understand what these families are going through to understand what we need to be doing. And another thing is we can't be in front of them or behind them. We got to stand next to them so we can provide them the support. Over the years, I constantly said that because of organizations like Moms Rising, we have more people in the table who can really speak on behalf of these families who are, and this allowed other organizations to feel okay to bring other individuals, to allow parents to be part of this conversation. So for sure, I can see the growth. I still feel that North Carolina can really do much better and allow other people. We gotta give those seats up and some conversations for those individuals who really are being affected by these conversations. Gotta sometimes take a step back and say, I can be your supporter, you need to be the spokesperson. And so just really let organizations know that it's okay to bring other individuals into the table. It will not disvalue the organization. But that's one of the biggest things, to be able to support those people in the table and allow them to. So whatever it takes, if it takes childcare for them to be there, if it takes an interpreter for whatever language is their native language, we need to be able to meet people where they are. That's including all these factors.
Awesome. Yeah, and as we've seen throughout the day from all the keynote speakers and in the Advocacy 101, it's that, having that authentic parent voice or youth voice at the table really has an impact on processes and policies, and in education for those that are not working the processes as other families and individuals are. So in the last few minutes, Shayla, what is your vision for the state of North Carolina?
I don't think I can give you one vision. My visions are totally different. All making sure that we serve and we meet families where they are. And one is making sure that we start from the beginning, and that means when the mother is pregnant and providing important education and all those. So as the kid is born and is growing and going to school and everything else, that child will have an amazing life because mom had the opportunity. Mom was not discriminated against. Mom had all equal rights as anybody else. Mom knows how to navigate the systems, right? So if it happens that mom birth to a beautiful child but has special needs, she knows how to get. Mom will have the support of all these legislators and understand and value her as an individual and take her family dynamic in consideration to move forward. So I do have a lot of hope because as we continue to grow here in North Carolina, we're becoming more diverse. And therefore, we really need to keep that in mind. And I just hope in general that besides everything, kids can grow out to be kids and not have to worry about moms and dads not coming home tonight because of the outside world. It's not designed for kids of color. So overall, maybe this is a broad answer, and this might be an answer that's not directly to one only vision, because I feel that we have to work on a lot of things in North Carolina, but we have taken big steps. And therefore, it's important that parents continue to use their voice. It's important that they vote on the leaders and the representatives that we have here so that we can make those changes possible. And allowing parents to say this is not okay and valuing their space and their voice will bring that vision present, in this state. And I feel that we have a lot of good things in North Carolina where we can set an example for many other states as well.
Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Shayla.
you.
That was wonderful, wonderful information, and we very much appreciate it.
Well, thank you so
We-
much for having me here as a parent. I'm speaking today as a parent. I hope a lot of parents can really relate to me and feel comfortable that it's okay and not be ashamed to share where you came from, because that's what makes us today, you know. And we're just, at the end of the day, we're just survivors trying to make sure that our kids have that smile, have that belly full, and have the same rights as any other child for their education.
I agree. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shayla.
Thank you.
All right, we are now going to move into, I'm going to turn it over to Ann to get us kicked off with our legislative panel discussion.
Okay, well, let's see if we can get our legislators on the screen if they would like to be. I saw Senator Fouché a minute ago. I'm hoping she can get back on. And if Senator Murdock and Representative Ensko, good morning. If they're there, they can join us now. Senator Fouché, I'm not sure I can hear you.
Perhaps if I unmute.
There you go. That's it. So do we know if Representative Ensko and Senator Murdock are with us yet?
I am looking, and so they're in attendees. Let's get them moved over so they can be on the panel. Hold on just a second.
Okay. Senator Fouché, how are things going for you with this crazy, crazy time in the pandemic?
I'm just trying to get it all done. It seems like it took a long time to get here, but now it's rapidly moving towards an end. So I think we're all at a place where we just want the election to be over so that we can really get into working to relieve some of these issues that are facing North Carolinians across the state on many fronts.
And how's your family personally handling the pandemic?
My family is doing well. I did have a sister who contracted the disease and is recuperating. She says
That's
that
good to
she's
hear.
about 85% back to normal, and this is after 3 months. So
Right.
still dealing with issues on taste and smell, but she is getting her energy back.
I think probably all of us know somebody at this point who has been working through the virus. But I wish your family well. I know my kids are teenagers and the isolation is getting a little bit difficult for us. We're trying to get little drips and drabs of normalcy in there, but they understand the significance of this, so they're hanging in there.
And so my children are adults. My issue is that we're not able to visit as we are used to. And for my oldest son, who lives only 5 minutes away, I've probably had him in my home maybe 6 times since March, and that's difficult.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's just usually you get to see them all the time.
We have Representative Ensko now on, and we're having some technical difficulties with Senator Murdock. So if Representative Ensko, are you there? Let me see.
Stacy, she is here. Representative Ensko, you'll need to unmute yourself. You should see a microphone next to your name where you'll be able to unmute yourself. Oh, there we go. I think you're unmuted now.
Good morning, Representative Ensko. I'm going to take a minute and introduce the 3 legislators, and hopefully everybody will be able to get on. Representative Ensko actually has been active on mental health issues for many years and has brought a lot of awareness to the issues at the legislature. She's a member of multiple committees where mental health, intellectual and developmental disabilities and substance use disorder bills are heard, including committees focusing on issues of appropriations and funding, Medicaid, healthcare, foster care, school safety, and COVID-19. And Senator Fouché has served in the North Carolina Senate since 2013. And previously, she was actually a member of the North Carolina House of Representatives. She serves on committees related to education, healthcare, Medicaid, and general government. And then hopefully Senator Murdoch will join us. She is really new to the system. She took over Senator McKissick's seat in the General Assembly just last spring. And that was just before the short session began. And she has already delved into work as she serves on committees related to health and human services, appropriations, insurance, and general government. So we're happy to have you all here. Welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this morning. So we will be asking a series of questions for each of you to respond to. And then for the last 10 minutes, and we had about an hour, so about 11:20, we will open the floor for each of you to speak for up to about 5 minutes to cover any issues or solutions or any messages that you wanted to give our participants. So maybe we should go ahead and get started, Stacy?
Yes,
Okay.
Senator Murdoch is trying to get signed back in.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're working it. Go right ahead.
All right, so we're starting with topics around schools and school-based mental health. School-based mental health services can provide convenient access to mental health services that some students may not otherwise have. However, they're also inaccessible to students who are not attending school due to school refusal, transportation barriers, physical illness, mental health issues, or other issues. What solutions are being explored in order to ensure that all students who need school-based mental health services are able to access them, including those students who are struggling to attend school? And I'll open it up. Whoever wants to start, you're welcome to start. Representative Ensko, I think you're on mute. Senator Fouché, did you want to start while we're working on her sound?
Sure. Well, excuse me. Given that we're not in session at this moment, you know, there is not legislation being proposed. We haven't had the opportunity to look at what has happened since school started back in August, to get a real sense of what's going on in schools. I know my son is a teacher. He's a high school teacher, and I know that he is worried about students with whom he's not able to see, students that he's not able to have conversations with, to get an assessment of how they're really dealing with this situation. I know that the State Board of Education had requested about $55 million in aid to provide these services. With the Corona relief package, the legislature did appropriate about $10 million, but certainly we know that that is not enough for the needs that we know that are happening across the state. So I'll yield to Representative Ensko if she's unmuted so that she'll have the opportunity to share. But again, we're not in session, so there is not legislation being proposed at this
No. We did just a minute ago.
She's going to try to call in. I do know that you all passed a bill last session that is going to require that there be a state Board of Education mental health plan. And then that, I think it's by next July, each public school unit is required to also submit their local mental health plans. And that includes protocol for identifying kids who are at risk of suicide or other mental health issues. That was a great advancement.
That's a good advancement, but again, with these advancements, there needs to be appropriations attached to it. A lot of times what we mandate without appropriations fall on the local school districts to provide the funding for the services that we agree that students need, but there needs to be the type of support from the legislature that gives these local school districts the ability to provide the services as well. Because what isn't funded by the state falls on the counties or those municipal school districts to fund with the other needs that they have to provide funding for.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. Stacy?
Yes, Representative Ensko, do you have a call-in number in the email that you were sent? Okay.
Well, we can stay with the.
Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll go to the next question while we're trying to work out these technical bugs here. And Representative Murdoch is working on getting on. So the next question is that there's so much talk about value-based care and outcomes leading to more successful treatment. How do you think prepaid health plans should work with members so that the PHPs, the prepaid health plans, knows and incorporates in a treatment plan what is important to the youth and the family?
Well, I'll start off by saying that, you know, if we're moving to the system, then we need to make sure that what is provided is that these plans are personalized to the point that the provider is familiar with and in connection and in conjunction with the members, provide a detailed plan so that the member knows that the services that are going to be provided are tailored for their needs and for the needs of that family. I know that this has been a situation that has been long coming. You know, we've debated how we move through with managed care and the system for a while now. And now that we're moving into it, we need to make sure that people are indeed being served and their needs are being met. So my hope would be that the providers and the members are able to sit down and provide a detailed, specific plan that addresses the needs of the member and that member's family.
And so in doing that, what are your thoughts about how you involve that member, whether they're an adult, if they're a youth, maybe their family member? What are your thoughts about how the PHP and the provider should be involving them?
Well, they need to make sure that in the case where the member cannot represent him or herself, that there is an advocate that is familiar with that person and able to describe, you know, in real clear and detailed manner what these needs are. I think in all of these situations, we have to make sure that what is being provided is meeting needs, and we're not just implementing a system that on its face has a connection with the members or the folk who are being served, but that indeed the programs are tailored and there is those discussions are being held that meet those specific needs so that they are addressed.
That's great. That's what I thought that you were saying.
People have to have an advocate to speak on their behalf. And those advocates need to be people who are familiar with and have the best interests of those persons at heart.
Right.
Kind of like we've kind of talked about throughout the thing today, is that authentic voice and that representation and support for this family.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to go on, and then maybe we can get Representative Ensko and Senator Murdoch.
Thank you.
Okay, so now someone else can answer some of these questions.
Days.
And so we can hear a different perspective.
Senator Fouché has been kind of in the spotlight since we've been having a few technical.
Yes, I've never had that happen, but this is the third device, and the third device is the charm.
Well, we're so glad to have you.
Third time is a charm, right? Third time is a charm.
Third time's a charm.
We have to figure out what Representative Ensko's third thing is going to be.
Yeah.
I guess it's just part and parcel with us trying to go virtual and learning this so quickly. Just as a whole state, as a whole society, we're trying to learn this. So everybody, I think, is being patient, knowing that it can happen at any time, that it's a learning experience.
Yes.
We were just talking about the Medicaid transformation plan and value-based care and outcomes leading to more successful treatment. And what we had asked, and Senator Fouché has already responded, her thoughts on are about how you think that the pre-paid health plans should work with members so that the PHP knows, and we would say the provider too, knows and incorporates in a treatment plan what is important to youth and their families. And I think Senator Fouché was talking about how it really just, and please add if you want to, or if I'm not capturing this correctly, but that it shouldn't just be a broad brush, that it really should get down to the specifics of that individual. And that she was also saying that there should be, if that individual cannot be there or can be there, but also needs somebody to advocate on their behalf, that's an important part too, so that the PHP and the provider knows that individual. But what are your thoughts about value-based care and outcomes and what we need to do with that?
I would definitely agree with that sentiment. I think it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. You definitely need the individualized method as much as you possibly can. I know some challenges will be in regards to reporting, but I think we'll just have to work through that. The providers that I've talked to, they are concerned about having to have another layer of documentation, and they don't want that to impact the care. But I definitely think we have to take it on a case-by-case basis and see what works best for that family.
Great. So we want to talk a little bit about affordable health coverage. Hundreds of thousands of North Carolina families have lost the health insurance they previously received from their jobs during this pandemic. What is your plan to get affordable health coverage to more parents and caregivers in North Carolina? And either one of you are welcome to start.
Expand Medicaid.
Exactly. Yeah.
The thing is, it's not just a good idea. It's working in 39 other states. The fact that we are one of the few that does not speak well of how we feel about the health of North Carolinians. And what this pandemic has done is laid bare, what could have happened, what should have happened had Medicaid been expanded when we had the opportunity. I've been in the General Assembly since 2013, and it was in 2013 that the General Assembly decided it would not expand Medicaid. And here we are, 2020, in a situation where no one can remember this country, and certainly not this state, going through a situation such as this, and we have people who don't have access to health care in a time when everyone should have access to health care.
One thing that some of your counterparts have brought up in advocacy institutes that we've held before this are the issues around, and this is related to Medicaid expansion, around the workforce that's needed and the community-based services that are needed. And I didn't know if you have any thoughts about that, of ways that may, and maybe organically that will happen if we expand Medicaid, that because there'll be a demand for it, the supply will grow. But do you all have any thoughts about that, or have you discussed it in the General Assembly about ways to encourage that, to be sure that people can have those services?
I'm sorry, I briefly lost internet. Just restate the end of that question, Ann. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm turning off Wi-Fi from another device to help me out here. Yes.
I was just
I heard the
wondering if you
Medicaid question though.
if you've talked in the legislature about ways to build workforce to ensure that there are community-based services, or if you have thoughts about that. It may just be an economic model that occurs when you expand Medicaid, that, you know, supply will increase too. But I didn't know if you had thoughts or if you all have talked about that.
No, not about that specifically, but I think, like you said, once the model is expanded, I think we can definitely go into that direction, and was wanting to chime in actually to that question of, it's directly connected to cost and also the ability to serve communities that are in need. I mean, our rural communities will get better coverage if Medicaid is expanded. A lot of our rural hospitals need that support. They need to have the ability to provide that coverage in the areas that there is only one provider, there is only one place to receive those services. And so I think not only in addition to cost of care, access to care to communities that need it is I just had to chime in and say that is one of the huge reasons why we need to expand it, even though I will admit in North Carolina, it is my understanding we have a higher rate of physicians that utilize Medicaid, which is good. They'll take those clients. But we still can do so much more if we can expand it and serve hundreds of thousands of more people.
And to the last part of your question, again, a lot of those conversations won't be held until we indeed go through that process of expanding Medicaid, so that we can talk about those ancillary services that will be a part of community when we know that we have access.
Yeah, and you know, I think this whole move to telehealth has helped us along in that discussion too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, from providers to the patients, we've received so much great feedback regarding telehealth. And one that we actually don't talk a lot, I have a really good friend that provides services to homeless veterans, and before this pandemic, they never envisioned doing anything remotely. They are still placing these at-need veterans for housing, and they connect them with Veteran Affairs and Services right here in Durham, and they're meeting their goals and targets. So even their, counterparts in DC had no idea that they could do this work remotely, and it's actually working well. And it's also a huge cost savings. I think the other piece with telehealth is just for the provider. So using this one example, the way the program was structured, they would physically go to an orientation, I believe in Zebulon, and now they do it remotely. So even the providers are saving money by not having to have these initial sessions on site, and they're doing them remotely and saving time and money. So I think we'll find a lot of cost savings as a result of telemedicine.
Okay, so we're going to move into paid family medical leave. So before the pandemic hit, only 12% of North Carolina workers had access to paid leave, and 1.6 million workers, 38% of our state's workforce, was unable to earn even a single day of paid sick leave. parents and caregivers are having to face tough choices between work and supporting their child's education through virtual school during the pandemic. So what is the path forward to ensure that every family has access to concrete supports that keep kids safe, like paid family and medical leave? Either of anyone who wants to go first can answer.
Well, I was going to yield to Senator Murdoch, but I'll say that it is, past time that we discuss these issues. And a number of us have tried to introduce legislation that will provide for these circumstances. I've been on the call since about 9:15. And so, hearing some of the comments from your other participants, nailed it right on the head. I introduced, along with two other senators, a bill. It was Senate Bill 137, which was called the Economic Security Act. And that bill would have provided for raising the minimum wage to $15 per hour. That bill would have required equal pay for equal work. That bill would have required paid sick leave and family medical leave, to the point where an employee would gain 1 hour sick time for every 30 hours worked. And in that bill, we made a distinction between small business owners and larger businesses, such that we understand that small businesses would not be able to provide the same benefits. But certainly over time, employees would amass sick leave and family medical leave time such that they could address the needs within their families. I don't need to tell you that that bill did not receive a hearing, because indeed it was not forwarded to the appropriate committee. What I heard one of your participants say earlier is that elections have consequences. And so if we want these things to occur, then we need to make sure that those folk who are representing the 10 million people in the state of North Carolina have these needs in mind and are willing to work for the accomplishment of them.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I think that particularly COVID-19 has forced us to examine, who essential workers are, and if they're essential, and we say that they're so very important, that means that they deserve not only higher wages, but the ability to have paid leave. They shouldn't have to risk their lives and go to work and say, oh, if I become infected and I have to quarantine myself for 14 days, I don't know if I'm going to have a job to go back to. They should not be in that situation. We also have to watch out for employers that are kind of, looking the other way and don't want folks to report if they do feel sick. We've seen issues with that as well. So I think for so many reasons, and also what Senator Fucci mentioned, this legislation is out there. It has been for a while. The House also filed a great paid leave bill, I believe 1 or 2 sessions ago. So there's so much research that shows that we need to do that. A lot of other countries do a better job with this than us, but I think COVID-19, it's been a stress test to all of our systems, and particularly our workforce, to show that we have to do a better job, and employees should be able to focus on their health and their families. And paid leave is just one piece of the puzzle that will just kind of help everyone's mental health as well, because just cannot stress enough how, and I've been one of those individuals. So I tell folks, I legislate from my lived experience. When I was an hourly employee right out of undergrad, I actually had pneumonia and didn't know it, and I showed up to work every day because I was an hour employee. If I stayed at home, I didn't get paid. I didn't even know how sick I was. I think there was another time I had bronchitis, same thing, still showing up to work every day. And when you're hourly and you don't get paid if you don't physically come into work, that's not helping anyone, because then you're going to work sick, and you are sick for a longer amount of time, and then can't even provide for your family. So just so many reasons to re-examine how we treat our workers and how we value them. And paid leave is something that we are going to have to move forward on.
That's great. So it sounds like once we can get these elections out of the way and the General Assembly comes back in January, that we'll see this issue come up again, hopefully.
Yes.
And hopefully this time it might have some movement and get it to the point of some conversation and discussion about it.
Yes.
And I think that speaks a bit to what Beth was talking about. Okay, my dog has gotten up and she's decided she wants to be a part of this. Excuse me. That Beth was saying, you know, that being an advocate. So just to kind of put it together for everybody who's listening, is that this is how it all fits together, is the work that you do as an advocate is what then can help and assist legislators with what they're doing and making sure that the important bills do get up for discussion. They do get sent to the appropriate committees. And we have that opportunity to talk about them as a state. Representative Vensko, have you joined us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. How about that?
Have you on?
I had another computer on too, and I think anyway, I just shut everything down and started all over again. Nice to see everyone.
That's the best way. Good to have you back. Well, we have been talking a lot about education this morning and school-based mental health. We've been talking about Medicaid transformation and value-based care and outcomes and the importance of bringing in the consumer or individuals who support them in their perspective. As we move toward value-based care and outcomes. And then we've also been talking about the benefits of expanding Medicaid. And so just to kind of catch up, I don't know if there on those three topics, if there's anything that you would like to add, and then we can kind of move on in the same at the same point in time. And let me add, the other thing is about paid family medical leave and talking about that. So are there some points that you want to make? I know that's kind of a lot.
And I haven't heard all of the discussion, but one thing I think is important is that if a family has a child that needs mental health services and they don't know where to go, that they should probably call their local health department. If they have private sector insurance, of course, they can call the insurance company. But if they're uninsured or they're on Medicaid and they don't really know where to go, they can call their local health department and find out. But they could also contact their LME MCO, and they can do that online. If they don't have online, I think there's a ** ask that they can type in, and they can get in that way. But so I think I think all of this is really important for us to be addressing these issues when we have children, because these often mental health services are a lifelong need. And so the sooner that they can get connected with somebody who's effective and work out a treatment that's good for them, I think that's really important for us to do. We just don't have the mental health services for either the Medicaid or the uninsured that we need right now. We don't have enough providers in the system. Every LME MCO is contracted with every provider that is providing across the state because there are so few. And so that's really important for us to be able to either pay the provider groups more in order to attract them, to attract more providers into the system. Make sure that the worker rates are also adequate to maintain the workers. And so I think there's a lot of work to do. And I hope we will be Democrats will have enough of a majority, either in one chamber or both, and the governor, of course, would be supportive of this too, that we can begin to actually shore up this system the way it needs to be. But a lot of our children's future, I think, really is at stake in many ways. I'd be glad to respond to any specifics that I've missed.
I think you summed it up actually. So I think we're ready to kind of start again with another question, if that's okay with you all.
Sure.
Home visiting programs, which match parents with trained professionals to provide in-home support during pregnancy and throughout their child's first years, are an effective method to support families, particularly when they're part of a comprehensive and coordinated system of services. Yet less than 1% of families in North Carolina have access to home visiting in their communities. Parenting education programs, which provide education and support outside of the home, also have limited accessibility across the state. There are evidence-based programs in our state, ones that reduce the likelihood of abuse of neglect, improve maternal health and child well-being, increase school readiness, and many other positive outcomes. How do you support the expansion of these programs across our state?
Well, I do support the expansion of those programs across the state. I think we would need to review. You clearly have more information about this than I do right now. So, you might be a really good resource for us to identify where the services are and who has good services and why we don't have them across the state. Do you know why we don't have them across the state? Is it just because people haven't initiated that, or they don't know about the services?
I'm sorry, I don't know. These are questions that we received from people who are going to be participating in the Institute. There are, I think, 6 organizations that are co-sponsoring this, and some of them, I think, have a lot of information about this, so we'd be happy to get you some more information about it.
I think that the more information we can get, part of the problem is because we've been out of power for 10 years, is that we've lost connection with a lot of groups because they work with the people that can actually get the bills passed. And so I think that we have a lot of reconnecting to do with groups, and there's so much information there that we just haven't had access to. So I think that's a good place to start, is getting in touch with those groups.
Mhm.
That's a great.
Yeah, I was just going to add, would definitely support. Oh, no, go ahead, Senator Fritchie.
Thank you, Representative Inscoe, for that answer, because when I read this question, I felt, some kind of way that I had no real sense of how to respond to this question. And again, I think it has more to do with us knowing about certain initiatives, but not having any real sense of where we are with those initiatives. We know what the governor has put forward. We know some of the things that we've heard from the State Board of Education. But in terms of what is happening across the state, if it's not within our own jurisdictions or our own districts, we have no sense of what is being pushed for, because again, going back to your earlier segment, when these groups come to the legislature to talk to the lawmakers about what they want to see accomplished, they have their top tier legislators, and then they have their backup legislators. And if they don't need to come to the backups, we don't hear it.
Yes.
And we don't even always know that we need to be reaching out. I do know that when we are in the majority, we would have we actually have access right now, but we also don't always know the questions to ask. But when we're in the majority, we will have really a lot of access to Mandy Cohen, to Secretary Cohen, and to all the leadership there, and they will be reaching out to whoever's in the majority. So that, but we have a lot. I will tell you that our both chambers have really a lot of sharp people in them that are really interested in getting engaged and knowing more, and are very competent to solve problems. So I'm optimistic. I think both chambers have recruited really good candidates that have had experience and success back at home in their own professions, and know how to make a system work, and bring those strategic and organizational skills with them to this position. So I think that I see that both of our chambers are really ready to go and take leadership. And but
Absolutely.
getting information is really key.
Yeah, and also just to add to that, can't stress enough how everyone's a lobbyist, and I don't think they know that. I think that when you advocate to the right folks and bring these issues to our attention, then we can draft the legislation. But if we aren't aware of the issue, then there's nothing that we can do about it. We've talked at length about the power of change, and if we have some changes in the fall, I definitely know these are issues that all of us on this call are very passionate about working with, but we have other legislators that are very passionate about these issues. As the other legislators mentioned, I wasn't aware of this specific service, but I am aware of the Cooperative Extension. Actually, they provide a lot of at-home support services to families regarding parenting and even how to have healthy food. As a previous soil and water supervisor, I know that in Durham, we do work with our local extension for those types of at-home services, but I support that. I think the classroom is the classroom, and we've been having a greater conversation when so many folks are doing at-home schooling of all the wraparound services that are needed outside of just, teaching students, and so much is falling on teachers. So I would love to continue to have a discussion of what are we doing outside of kind of the traditional K-12, other services we're providing to parents at home. And also my mom was a daycare nurse and supervisor. So I'm passionate about everything regarding early childhood education. She would go into homes and do education about SIDS, just so that, parents would know how to properly care for their children at home to reduce the occurrence of SIDS. So I am a big proponent of that, but that program was specific to the health department. So again, it wasn't implemented across the state. It was just something they did on their own locally, but would love to hear more.
So I can add one other thing I think is important that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is that we also would have access to our legislative staff, all the bill drafters, the fiscal research division, and they have a enormous amount of information and have a historical setting, because a lot of them have been there long enough to have seen these programs grow under Democrats and then be pulled back under the Republican leadership. So, and by the way, I'm a two-party person. I believe in two parties. I don't think we all make mistakes, and so I do hope that we can build more collegiality. I just think that that's important in the long run if we can't do it in the short run, but we've got to figure out how to do that. So that's a little bit off.
I really appreciate the discussion that you've had, particularly on this question, and your frankness about not necessarily having all the information about that program, because it really speaks to the whole purpose of this Advocacy Institute, of what we can do as a community to support you all and to help you, that it really is our responsibility to make sure that you are aware that this issue is important to us, or that issue is important to us. And there also seems to be a trend, in Medicaid transformation, they are building in that multidisciplinary focus, the integrated care, but even expanding beyond that to bringing in education and social services and juvenile justice, all to that point. And then it makes sense to bring, of course, the parent into the discussion about a youth's treatment plan. And it just sounds, I really appreciate that you all are so open to that and discussing that this morning. I think Stacy has the next question.
I do. All right, so considering that left untreated, childhood trauma costs states billions of dollars in healthcare costs, mental health care, court costs, and lost wages, to name a few. Would you be willing to invest in programs that have been proven to heal trauma, such as mentoring programs, high quality counseling like EMDR, and trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy in affordable, accessible, nutritious food?
Well, go ahead, Valerie, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me just say something too. Yes, of course. But I really do depend on the experts in the field. You are our experts. And so, and the department, the working with the department experts there. I'm not sure how new services get incorporated into the old services. But that's, I think that's done at the Medicaid level. So the Medicaid, but the funding, once it's an authorized service, then we have a lot of work to do to catch up with funding. Our programs are really terribly underfunded right now. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do with that. I think that's at the federal level too, and the state level both, that our taxes have been cut so much and we have not had any new sources of revenue. Meanwhile, we've had inflation. So we've actually forced all of our services to pull back. And when you have services that are so inadequate, it's not a whole lot better than having nothing. You know, right. And you are exactly right. This is costing us dollars right now. And the longer we put off providing services, the more costly it's going to be. So getting early intervention. I'm a big public health person. Early intervention is really important, and prevention and early intervention.
Anybody else? Senator?
Just to thank them for their question, I think having services that are focused on trauma, and just particularly with our children, of some of the things that children are witnessing, you know, in homes, and then, you know, educators expect them to come to school and act as if nothing has happened when children are going through so much. And I think you just kind of have to really dig beneath the surface to kind of see what's going on there. So I do know, speaking for Durham County, we do have a movement to do more of that with our public school system. We actually have a diversity and inclusion officer, and they're doing a lot of amazing work that is kind of more of the mentorship, and again, stressing the need to do things outside of the classroom. So again, any ideas folks have, please send them to us. But I'm definitely excited that we are transitioning to a model that really does get to the heart of trauma, because it just really impacts the way that a student lives and thrives, all children.
All right, Senator Fauci, anything to add? All right, Ann?
Okay, well, we're going to talk a little about childcare. Childcare is an essential service for children and families, especially now, yet childcare centers across the state are closing. Workers make on average $10 an hour, and many of the workers do not have access to health care. How can we change the entire childcare system so the workers who we trust with the care of our children are treated like the essential workers and professionals they are? And I know we've already talked a little bit about this, but maybe you all have something to add specific to the childcare service system.
Yeah, I think that I'll jump right in. I actually wrote an op-ed for the Indy Week. I was really concerned about some of the childcare regulations that were rolled back in our most recent COVID-19 bill. So we removed the provision that those that work in those facilities would have to have just basic background checks, waive some requirements even for basic things such as smoke detectors, which may seem like a small thing, but there was a daycare, I believe in Pennsylvania, a home child care center, about 7 to 8 children that actually died as a result of a fire. So we have regulations and rules for a reason. So I think in addition to what they are paid, I think that the progress we made, particularly under the administration of Governor Jim Hunt with Smart Start, we can't roll that back. And I think that what I would love to do, when she was not with us this morning, also Senator Terry Van Duyn, she was the one that actually proposed these amendments on the floor to say, this is dangerous, we're going in the wrong direction. I think we need to continue to maintain a high standard. These are our children. They deserve our best. We can't act as if, oh, it's just, you know, grandma at home taking care of children. No, this is serious business, and we need to protect our children. Unfortunately, folks don't want to pay these providers what they deserve. I used to actually work for the Child Care Association that's in Chapel Hill, and we provided scholarships to these providers, because they also didn't have the funding to even get an associate's degree, let alone a 4-year degree. So we were able to provide scholarships for their schooling. So fully support grants that will offset the cost of that. Do think we have to look at that pay, but we also cannot leave those regulations behind as well. So something that we'll just have to continue to keep an eye on. And I think it's a great model where, yes, we need to learn from COVID. COVID has changed the world, but we also can't use COVID as an excuse to deregulate industries that need regulation.
So I would just add that one place we're missing out right now is child care subsidy, the federal child care subsidy. So we need to be drawing down more of that child care subsidy so that we can actually support more child care centers with child care subsidy. And we used to add child care subsidy state dollars to draw down more of the federal dollars every year, and we've quit doing that. We've actually cut back on child care subsidy, so there are fewer children that can be supported and fewer child care centers that can be supported with that money. So that's another place to go for resources.
Senator Fouché?
The only thing I would add to what has been said is that we support universal free pre-K, and that will encompass the standards that are necessary. It will provide a pay system that is supportive of the essential workers that provide childcare, and it will go a long way in accomplishing what we feel is necessary to provide not just the safety, but the advancement, the development, and to ensure that those workers are paid in a respectful manner.
So I always think that if we could provide early childhood services to enriched early childhood services to every child that needed them, that in 2 or 3 generations we could close most of our prisons. Really. And my life is better off if I live in a safe community. My life's better off if everyone's out working and contributing. So I think a lot of the actions we've taken have hurt everyone. They're actions that have hurt all of society. It's not rational. So anyway, we've got.
There's a strong connection between everything that we've been talking about this morning. You expand Medicaid, more people have access to healthcare, they're healthier, that helps them to work and be more productive in the community. There's ties to everything.
And then they can pay back and contribute more in many ways.
Exactly. Right. We've come to that point where we want to just kind of open it up for you all to talk just on any points that you want to make sure that you address, or anything that you would like to say to our participants today. So we allotted about 5 minutes each. You don't have to take that whole time, but would anybody like to start?
Well,
I'll start.
Go ahead, Valerie. Good.
I started at the beginning, so you go ahead.
Well, I don't really have a whole lot to say, except that our children are our best natural resource. Our children are our best natural resource. And so it's really important for us to establish that and maybe make sure that we are educating people about that concept, that we've first and foremost, we really need to take care of our children. I mean, they are like climate change. If we don't take care of children, our future really is at risk. So I think however we do it, and that I would say that Democrats really need to have a program of making sure that we are we're educating people about the value of early childhood education and of enriched K through 12, and then just education in general. And we also need to make sure people understand democracy and that we all have a role to play, that every one of our votes is really an enormous resource, and that we all need to be engaged in the political process and the process of democracy and government. And we need to educate our next generation about that. So that's my sermon.
Yeah, I'll let Senator Fishi close us out, but I was just going to add, honestly, with a call to action, with your earlier question about, services that are provided at home to children and to assist families, bring issues to our attention. And so I'm optimistic that, with some changes, I can definitely tell you in my office and a lot of my other colleagues, we will be spending December drafting bills, filing bills, getting ready for the long session. So I think in addition to this discussion, so that we are the most prepared, we are having organizations to provide us with their legislative priorities. So again, December for me is all about drafting bills, filing them, getting ready for January, since we may go back on the 12th or the 13th. And, being a legislator is a two-way street. We don't know what we don't know. So I think bring issues to our attention. We will do all that we can to address them, even if they aren't addressed in January. If we aren't aware of them, we can't also work on the strategy of how to best present it, who is going to support it, who's going to sponsor these bills, what other agencies do you need to partner with to get things passed. And since you did mention childcare specifically, can't stress enough that I would love to partner with a number of the organizations that are here today to make sure that we protect our childcare facilities. I think it's one of the in my opinion, one of the tragedies that came out of our last session. And I think that it's something that has to be addressed and amended. And it's definitely on my list in January, but can't stress enough that we have to protect our children in their child care facilities. And so that is one where not only do we file legislation, we also need that grassroots support. We need folks to email their legislators, to call them, to be able to show, hey, I've received letters and emails from 50 constituents. This is clearly an issue. This is something that they care about and not just, a pet project for me as a legislator. So I think keep the conversation going. At one point, I think we had almost 100 people here with us today. So would just add that all of you are advocates and you need to, let us know, what it is that we should be fighting for. We're still in COVID, but just like this, we're having virtual meetings to learn more about these issues every week. I'm meeting with groups and organizations. So just continue to bring these issues to our attention. We will research them, see what we can do, and look forward to working with all of you in the next session, long session.
Thank you.
So first of all, let me just thank you all for having us. I don't know how you settled on the three of us, but I am certainly happy that I was one of the chosen because I did learn a lot. As I said earlier, I came on the call right around 9:20 or so, and I thought it was interesting, the civics lesson, because I think what a lot of people don't realize, going back to what Representative Inscoe said, is that we do have a two-party system. And when it works the way it's supposed to work, then that means we bring ideas to the table that represent the whole and not just a few. And so moving forward, if we can ensure that we're bringing the best ideas to the table, such that we are considering all of our children, all of us should be advocates for children. That is our future. And when we consider all of the things that we have learned as we move through the coronavirus, we talk a lot about it, but we don't talk so much about what we have learned in order to address issues that have been longstanding, but they have not been served. And now we can't ignore them because we're hearing the same types of issues from a greater number of people. We know that we need to provide services to ensure that our children are fed, that they are sheltered, that their issues are being addressed, that those situations where they are exposed to danger, where they are exposed to abuse, where they are exposed to neglect, need to be addressed. And that we cannot talk about how much it costs to address them. We have to ensure that they are indeed addressed. And we don't know unless we're told. So I am happy that moving forward, We have advocates now who understand how to get to us, how to make sure that we are hearing them, and how to ensure that we are indeed representing their interests. We serve at your pleasure. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that moving forward that we will hear more from you so that we can serve you in a better manner. Thanks again.
Thank you all so much for being here this morning, for being patient with the technology issues that we've had, and just for being so honest and open in your questions. It's just been energizing to me, and I imagine to everybody else. You really have really set it clear about how this is a partnership and how we can support you. So thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you for having us. This has been
Thank
wonderful.
you. It's been great. Learned a lot.
One final thing before we wrap up this panel, and I know that Senator Murdock had referenced to it a minute ago that she was holding virtual meetings, is in this time when we're not able to drop information off at your offices like we used to because of COVID, is there a better way to connect with you guys than one over the other? Is email the best way to send the resources and information? Okay.
Email is great, and my legislative assistant is, her name is Sheena Matthews, and so when we receive those requests, we do virtual meetings every week. So whether it's an organization or an individual, for example, I'm working on a bill where doula services will be covered under Medicaid. So I am doing Zoom meetups with midwives and advocates just about that one bill. So definitely email us, and if appropriate, we can get a virtual meeting scheduled as well.
Awesome. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, apologies on the technical difficulties, but so glad that we were able to finally get you guys all on here at the same time. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. As we close out today, we want to remind everybody that we will be having a survey. You guys got a survey to fill out. And we want to thank you for attending today's Institute. We hope that you found that the content and the information that you received was useful, and we'll appreciate any feedback that you provide on the survey. We appreciate all of our presenters, speakers, and co-sponsors. We appreciate the information that our panelists and our presenters shared with us today. And thank you all for helping make this happen.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.